On a quiet February morning in Burleson, Texas, Officer Joshua Lott pulled over a silver pickup truck for what seemed like a routine traffic stop. But inside that truck sat a man whose next actions would shatter lives and send shockwaves through the entire community. His name was Jerry Don Elders, a 39-year-old with a long criminal history, a volatile temper, and a reputation for unpredictability. According to investigators, even before Officer Lott approached the vehicle, Elders reportedly told a passenger he intended to shoot the officer. Moments later he opened fire, striking Officer Lott multiple times at close range before speeding off, leaving the officer bleeding on the roadside. But the nightmare was only beginning. As law enforcement scrambled to respond, Elders carjacked and kidnapped 61-year-old Robin Waddell, a kind, well-known woman from the community who was simply going about her morning routine. She had no idea that crossing paths with Elders would seal her fate. Investigators later revealed that after forcing Robin into her own truck at gunpoint, Elders shot and killed her during his escape. Hours later, her truck was discovered abandoned and set on fire. Elders' attempt to destroy evidence and cover his tracks. What began as a simple traffic stop had now turned into a police shooting, a kidnapping, and a cold-blooded murder, all within a single morning. A massive manhunt followed, gripping Texas in fear. Who was Jerry Don Elders? What drove him to such brutality? And how did this violent spree end with a death sentence in a Texas courtroom? To understand this true crime story better, let's go back to where it all began, but first, hit that subscribe button and turn on your notification bell icon so you won't miss our next jaw-dropping true crime story. To understand how Jerry Don Elders could commit such a violent and chaotic spree, we have to step back and look at the man behind the crimes, his past, his patterns, and the warning signs that, in hindsight, painted a troubling picture long before that February morning. Jerry Don Elders was born on May 26, 1981 in Texas. He grew up in a working-class community, surrounded by the quiet, rural landscapes of Johnson County. But beneath the surface of that small-town life, trouble was brewing from an early age. Friends and acquaintances described Elders as unpredictable, someone who could be charming one moment and explosively violent the next. He wasn't known for holding stable jobs, and over the years his behavior became more erratic and dangerous. Elders spent time in and out of jail, and during his incarceration, authorities documented several behavioral issues. He wasn't just a quiet inmate doing time, he was known to be defiant, sometimes aggressive, and often under the influence of substances. People who knew him on the outside described a similar pattern. Drug use that blurred his judgment, paranoia that made him lash out, and a deep-seated anger that seemed to boil just beneath the surface. Family relationships were strained. Those close to him described Elders as distant, volatile, and often unreachable. He drifted from place to place, rarely putting down roots, often relying on criminal activity to get by. Over time, those warning signs became harder to ignore. A combination of substance abuse, a criminal lifestyle, and a simmering hostility toward law enforcement created a dangerous cocktail. By early 2021, Jerry Don Elders was no stranger to the law, nor to violence. But what no one knew was that he was about to commit the kind of crime spree that would shock Texas, devastate families, and ultimately land him on death row. On the early morning of April 14, 2021, the city of Burleson, Texas, was still and quiet. It was just after 4 a.m. when Burleson police officer Joshua Lott initiated what seemed like a routine traffic stop. The vehicle was a silver pickup truck occupied by Jerry Don Elders and two other individuals. To Officer Lott, this was a standard procedure, nothing out of the ordinary. But inside that truck, something far more dangerous was unfolding. According to later testimony, Elders had reportedly told a passenger before the stop that he intended to shoot the officer. This chilling statement revealed his mindset: deliberate, violent, and fully prepared to confront law enforcement. As Officer Lott approached the vehicle, Elders pulled out a gun and opened fire at close range, hitting the officer multiple times. Lott collapsed on the roadside, critically wounded. Fellow officers rushed to his aid, and he was transported to the hospital in serious condition, but ultimately survived his injuries. What started as a traffic stop had turned into a targeted ambush within seconds. As the sound of gunfire echoed and dispatchers scrambled, Elders sped away. But his escape quickly escalated into something even more horrifying. Around this same time, 61-year-old Robin Waddell was beginning her morning like any other. Robin was a kind-hearted, well-liked woman in her community, someone who went about her daily routines with quiet consistency. That morning, her path crossed with Elders at exactly the wrong moment. Elders confronted Robin, carjacked her at gunpoint, and forced her into the passenger seat of her own truck. Witnesses in the area reported seeing a disturbance: a man wielding a gun, a woman being forced into a vehicle. Multiple 911 calls were placed as the situation unfolded. Surveillance footage and dispatch audio captured the urgency of officers trying to track Elder's movements while also responding to the officer down call. For Robin, what began as a normal morning instantly turned into a nightmare. She wasn't targeted because of who she was. She happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Elders used her truck to continue his flight from law enforcement, holding her captive as he fled. As dawn approached, Elders drove toward the nearby city of Joshua, Texas. In a shocking move, he crashed through the gate of the Joshua Police Department, ramming Robin's pickup through the secure barrier while officers inside scrambled to react. It was a brazen act, charging through a police department's gate while armed, using a kidnapped woman's vehicle as a battering ram. Was this desperation? Defiance? Or a man spiraling completely out of control? Shortly after, Elders abandoned the truck. Authorities soon found it engulfed in flames, deliberately set ablaze in an attempt to destroy evidence. Tragically, investigators confirmed that during his escape, Elders had shot and killed Robin Waddell. Her truck became both his getaway vehicle and the site of her final moments. The fire was his last effort to cover his tracks, but the horror of what he had done was already clear. As news of the shooting and kidnapping broke, law enforcement agencies across Texas reacted swiftly. Within minutes of discovering Robin Waddell's burned truck and confirming the connection to the earlier shooting, multiple agencies launched a full-scale manhunt for Jerry Don Elders. Burleson Police, Joshua Police, Johnson County Sheriff's Office, the Texas Department of Public Safety, and federal authorities coordinated their efforts. Roadblocks were set up on major routes, and alerts were broadcast to surrounding counties warning residents about an armed and dangerous fugitive on the loose. Helicopters were deployed overhead to search rural backroads and wooded areas where Elders might try to hide. Patrol cars formed search grids, combing through neighborhoods, fields, and stretches of highway. Dispatchers fielded a constant stream of calls, tips, and possible sightings from residents on edge. Across Burleson, Joshua, and nearby towns, fear began to spread. Schools and businesses monitored police alerts, and locals were urged to stay indoors and report anything suspicious. The media picked up the story quickly, and soon Elders' name and mugshot were being broadcast on every major local news station, turning him into one of the most wanted men in Texas that day. As the hours passed, the net began to tighten. Investigators tracked leads and surveillance footage to determine Elders' movements after he abandoned the burning truck. Around 1 p.m., law enforcement received information that Elders was spotted near Duncan, Oklahoma, roughly 140 miles north of Burleson. At this point, he was believed to be on foot or attempting to find another vehicle. His flight across state lines escalated the situation, bringing Oklahoma law enforcement agencies into the coordinated manhunt. Residents in the area described the atmosphere as tense and surreal: helicopters circling overhead, police vehicles blocking streets, officers with rifles drawn moving from house to house. It was the kind of scene people normally only see on television, but this time it was unfolding right outside their doors. Elders was ultimately taken into custody in Duncan without gunfire, bringing an end to the intense manhunt that spanned several hours and multiple jurisdictions. Officers apprehended him and transported him back to Texas to face charges. His arrest marked the close of a day that began with a routine traffic stop and ended with one of the largest multi-agency manhunts the region had seen in years. Law enforcement officials later praised the rapid coordination between Texas and Oklahoma agencies, crediting their teamwork, surveillance systems, and community tips for bringing Elders into custody within the same day of his violent spree. By the afternoon of April 14, 2021, the man who had shot a police officer, kidnapped and murdered Robin Waddell, and crashed through a police department gate was finally in handcuffs. In the aftermath of Jerry Don Elders' arrest, the adrenaline of the manhunt gave way to the methodical precision of a capital murder investigation. Detectives and forensic specialists now faced the crucial task of reconstructing every step of Elders' violent spree, collecting irrefutable evidence that would hold up in a Texas courtroom. Their goal was clear: to build a comprehensive, airtight capital murder case, one that left no doubt about his guilt. One of the most critical pieces was ballistic evidence. Investigators recovered shell casings from the scene of Officer Lott's shooting and compared them to those found near Robin Waddell's burned truck. Ballistics experts conducted a series of tests, matching the unique rifling patterns on the bullets and casings to the handgun recovered during Elders' arrest in Oklahoma. The match was exact. This forensic link tied the same weapon to both the attempted murder of the police officer and the killing of Robin Waddell, an essential step in proving premeditation and continuity of the crime spree. Vehicle data also played a pivotal role. Investigators examined surveillance footage from traffic cameras and nearby businesses along Elder's escape route, piecing together his movements after the shooting. License plate readers picked up Robin's truck as it sped away from the carjacking scene and later as it approached Joshua. By synchronizing this digital evidence with 911 call logs, dispatch audio and eyewitness reports, prosecutors were able to create a minute-by-minute timeline of Elder's actions between 4 a.m. and his arrest around 1 p.m. in Duncan, Oklahoma. This timeline became one of the prosecution's strongest assets, painting a clear picture of a deliberate, escalating series of crimes. As for Elders himself, his behavior after arrest was telling. According to reports, he offered little cooperation and made no significant statements that helped investigators. He did not express remorse, nor did he deny his involvement. His silence was not a defense, it was merely the absence of one. Prosecutors would later emphasize this lack of remorse during trial proceedings. Meanwhile, the Johnson County District Attorney's Office and Texas prosecutors worked closely with investigators to piece together the legal case. They filed capital murder charges against Elders for the killing of Robin Waddell, as well as charges for the attempted capital murder of Officer Lott, aggravated kidnapping, arson, unlawful possession of a firearm and evading arrest. Because Robin's murder occurred during the commission of another felony, kidnapping and robbery, it qualified under Texas law as a capital offense, making Elders eligible for the death penalty. The arrest of Jerry Don Elders was only the beginning. What followed was one of the most closely watched trials in Johnson County in years. The state of Texas versus Jerry Don Elders was not just about punishing a man for his crimes. It became a public reckoning with the terrifying events of April 14, 2021. In that courtroom, every detail of his violent spree would be dissected, examined, and laid bare before a jury. Elders faced a slew of charges. Capital murder for the killing of Robin Waddell during the commission of kidnapping and robbery. Attempted capital murder for the shooting of Officer Joshua Lott. Aggravated kidnapping, arson, unlawful possession of a firearm and evading arrest. The prosecution's strategy was clear from the outset. Paint a picture of deliberate violence and calculated choices, not a man acting impulsively. They emphasized Elders' premeditation, the chilling statement he made to a passenger before the traffic stop, declaring his intent to shoot the officer. Prosecutors highlighted aggravating factors that made this a death penalty case. The murder occurred during a kidnapping. A police officer was shot in the line of duty. Elders' actions displayed a clear disregard for human life at every step. In their opening statements, prosecutors spoke directly to the jurors. This was not a man backed into a corner. This was a man who made choices, to shoot, to kidnap, to kill, to burn, to flee. The defense team meanwhile tried to humanize Elders. Their strategy centered on raising doubts about his mental state at the time of the crimes. They pointed to his long history of drug abuse, arguing that his judgment was impaired by methamphetamine use and that he was acting in a frenzied, chaotic state rather than carrying out a calculated plan. They hinted at possible mental health issues, though they did not present a full insanity defense. At points, they attempted to minimize the element of premeditation, suggesting that the events spiraled out of control rather than being planned. Then came the family of Robin Waddell. Her loved ones shared what she meant to them, her kindness, her routines, the hole her death had left in their lives. Her daughter spoke through tears, describing the last conversation she ever had with her mother. The weight of their loss filled the courtroom. For the jury, this was no longer just a case file, it was human tragedy made real. Forensic experts and investigators followed, presenting their ballistic evidence, surveillance footage and digital timeline. They walked the jury through the forensic trail that tied Elders to every scene. Jurors were shown animations of bullet trajectories, photos of the burned truck, and surveillance clips synchronized with dispatch audio. Every detail reinforced the prosecution's argument. Elders' actions were deliberate and sustained, not accidental. As the trial reached its climax, both sides delivered powerful closing arguments. Prosecutors urged the jury to hold Elders accountable for the devastation he caused. They reminded them of Officer Lott's bravery, Robin Waddell's final moments, and the terror inflicted on an entire community. The defense asked the jury to consider his impaired mental state, hinting that life imprisonment might be more appropriate than the death penalty. When the jury finally retired to deliberate, the courtroom fell silent. Hours later, they returned with their decision. In a packed courtroom, the foreman rose and announced the verdict. guilty on all major counts including capital murder. There was no ambiguity, no hesitation. Elders had been found fully responsible for his actions on April 14, 2021. Family members wept. Officers embraced. The community, which had followed every moment of the trial, exhaled collectively. The guilty verdict was a turning point: justice for Robin Waddell, accountability for the attempted murder of Officer Lott, and a strong statement from the state of Texas. Section 7. Sentencing and Death Row. The trial may have ended with a guilty verdict, but for many, the most emotional chapter came during the sentencing phase in May 2024. After hearing additional arguments from both sides, the jury was tasked with making one of the gravest decisions in the American justice system: whether Jerry Don Elders should live out his days in prison or face the death penalty. Under Texas law, capital punishment is reserved for the most severe crimes, including murder committed during the commission of another felony, such as kidnapping or robbery, and the murder of a law enforcement officer. Elders' case met both criteria. The prosecution argued that his actions were not only calculated and brutal but also represented a direct assault on public safety and the justice system itself. On May 6, 2024, Elders was formally sentenced to death. He was transferred to the Texas Department of Criminal Justice intake facility, beginning his journey through the state's death row system. Mugshots were taken, intake procedures were completed, and Elders was assigned to Polunsky Unit, the maximum security prison that houses Texas death row inmates. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered as Robin's family, law enforcement officials, and prosecutors spoke to the press. There was relief, sorrow, and a sense of finality. A community that had been shaken by one man's violent choices now watched as justice reached its ultimate conclusion. What do you think about this case? Do you believe justice was served, or are there deeper issues at play in how cases like this are handled? Share your thoughts, theories, or questions in the comments below. I'd love to hear your perspective. And if you found this story powerful, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss upcoming deep dives into real cases that shape communities across America.